Good. All right, we're gonna go ahead and start the panel. Thank you for coming for our Burnout in the Game Industry panel. Just a warning, this panel isn't about the game Burnout or Burnout Paradise. Yeah, so just to talk a little about what this panel is going to be about is kind of burnout, which is something that happens from overwork or doing too much stuff. And it's pretty common in the game industry. And we're not only going to talk about like kind of stories, but also how to prevent it and how to kind of recover from it. But first, let's start with some intros. Who wants to go first?
Do you want to intro yourself?
Sure, I'll go first. My name is Sam Palavan. I'm a game developer. I've been in the industry for about a little more than 5 years. The first game I worked on was a tiny game called Pirate 101.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was an intern, and then I went on to work at a mobile studio. I mostly do design work, and then I started my own company called Taco Illuminati, and we made a mobile game called Looty Dungeon. Thanks. We are now working with a company called Farbridge, which is like a VR startup, so I'm working on a VR game. So I've done like indie stuff and studio stuff. And then at PAX, I'm showing my game, like my own, almost. I work with this guy, Michael, on a game called Bill Hates Video Games, which you can check out at PAX Rising. Yeah, so that's my long game dev history.
Yes, I'll go. Okay. So hi, hello. I'm Carrie Witt, the art director at Alchemy Labs, also creative generalist and game dev. Geez, I guess I've been in the industry for about 10 years now. Originally starting as an intern when I was in college at Alchemy. And Alchemy Labs is known mostly for our VR stuff. We used to do PC and mobile games back in the oldie day. But now we're known for Job Simulator, Rick and Morty VR, and most recently, Vacation Simulator.
Yeah, Rick and Morty.
Of course, there's always someone. And yeah, I guess similar to Sam, I've kind of run the full gamut of experiences in the industry, where back in the day it was just me and one other person as Alchemy Labs, and then soon it was 4 people, and we got acquired by Google, and now we're about 22 people. Did a bunch of freelance contracts in between there, did a brief stint at Harmonix, kind of all over the place.
I have to work, so you should go first.
Hi, my name is Richard Terrell. I go by Kirby Kid. There's a Kirby here, there's a Kirby here. And I got the name from playing competitive Smash Brothers Melee before sports and before we had a scene out there in Texas driving to people's houses and playing games. So it's a long history of that, but I've been making games and thinking about games since I was 3 years old. And I've done a few indie title, Sports Friends with Barbari Ball. That was the game that I worked on. And now I'm working at a studio, Gunfighter Games in Austin, Texas. We released Remnant from the Ashes last year. And it's a third-person shooter, obviously in the post-apocalyptic time frame, because obviously it's a shooter. And I've worked on some games on my own. An independent game about learning. It's a puzzle game. And I've been a consultant for AAA companies. And I've done game testing and sort of a little of everything, a little game writing.
My name is Kat. I am a senior audio producer and sound designer at Team Audio. I've been in the industry for 11 years now. Something really important that I think it's necessary that everyone knows is the number of years you've been in the industry doesn't really mean anything, because there's so much that senior people can learn from people right out of college. There's so much that people right out of college can learn from senior people. And the moment that you feel like you know everything, you've become irrelevant in the industry. So it's super imperative for anyone here wanting to get into games, anyone here that's currently in games, it's important that you know if the moment you stop thinking that you're a student, you're already behind the curve. I've worked on games like Borderlands, the first one, Age of Empires Online. I worked on a Whole Foods game where you're sorting vegetables, which was pretty cool. worked on, what else? Darksiders 3. I have no notes. If you see me referring to them, it's a picture of my dog. Some of them wrote notes. I'm like, oh no, oh no.
Dude, mine are on a receipt from today. Like, don't worry about it.
That's pretty slick. So, I mean, I'm just gonna be honest. It's my dog. I'm just gonna be like, just accept it for what it is. I've worked on indie games. I've worked on AAA games, and I hope to keep working on games because you're supposed to think like a student. Write that down. The end. Thank you. It's a corgi. His name is Potato. Oh my God. His full name is Potato Pancake with syrup. Not with syrup, but with syrup. Super important. Super important.
He's got the best notes.
I mean, thank you. I appreciate it. I try my best.
Cool. So I thought.
This is now a dog panel.
Panel is cool.
Yeah, to kind of prep for this panel, I was like, what's the actual definition of burnout? Because, I've been through it and I know what it is, but I looked it up and the dictionary definition is physical or mental collapse caused by overwork or stress, which I really like the word collapse in there because it's like, it implies that there's structure before, that you're like stable and then you collapse.
It's like Jenga.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pulled out too many pieces.
Yeah. It's like when you are overworked, you're slowly pulling out pieces of yourself, and at a certain point, you feel like hopefully it's stable enough, then almost life knocks on the table and you've got to start over again. But people still want to keep pulling out pieces, and you're not ready. You're still trying to build pieces of yourself back together again.
Yeah, do you all have any kind of specific stories where you kind of knew you were burnt out or like found out you were burnt out?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Actually, I'd be interested to see how many of y'all in the audience, like, I don't know how many of y'all are in games or adjacent industries or whatever, but like, who in here has personally experienced burnout? Holy hell, okay.
There's a lot of hands.
I feel y'all. Well, I guess like kind of in a relevant way, I am actually on sabbatical right now because I am hella burned out. And for me, kind of it takes a lot for me to realize like I'm beyond the point of no return. And for me, that's always like a physical manifestation, which I always thought was a weird made up thing until I actually experienced something like that, where it's like, you feel all of the stress that you've had bottled up inside of you, like you feel that every day, right? Like you feel it in your muscles, you feel yourself being tense. And I guess like how Sam was talking about like that point of collapse where it's no longer sustainable in that way. So like the 2 times it got to that point for me were right before we shipped Job Simulator back in the day, and end of last year as we were trying to, like right in the middle of crunch of Vacation Simulator, where it's like extreme physical body pain in certain spots where I'm like, oh man, like I sit like such a jabroni in my chair all day, like hunched over because I'm 6 feet tall, like it's probably just me like doing whatever, not taking care of myself, going to the doctor, not getting any results coming in where like, hey, there's a thing wrong with you, and eventually someone's like, hey, are you doing okay? Like mentally, like are things good? Because that can manifest physically. And like that was finally the moment where I realized, hey, my body is like telling me to stop. And it's weird how sometimes it takes something like that for you to like have a step back moment, but I guess that's like why it's a thing that happens. I don't know if you all have experienced something like that.
It is odd when your body knows before you even know, because a lot of times we're running on like, oh my gosh, everything's on fire. Just keep plowing through, make sure everyone gets what they need done, help other people, and you forget that you're a person too. I actually had, last year, some of my friends, both in the industry and out of the industry, like eventually pulled me aside for a talk, and they're like, yo, you okay? Like, we haven't seen you. Or they'll be like, you have canceled on us so many times. What up? I'm like, oh, I've just been really busy. And they're like, no. What's up? I actually, talking about physical manifestations of stress, I gained 20 pounds last year, which doesn't sound like a lot, but kind of does. And I went to, like, this is a true story, I went to see my doctor, just, regular wellness checkup, and she was like, wow, you gained 20 pounds really quickly. Is it possible you're pregnant? I'm like, let me tell you. I'm a recreational eater, and I'm a stress eater. And she's like, can you not? I'm sorry, you asked me if I'm pregnant. So yeah, it's really strange when you don't realize these weird habits that you're picking up, like your joints are hurting more, or you're getting more back pains and things like that. It's so strange when your body knows you've moved past your limits, but your mind knows, like, I need to help my team. I need to make sure that we get this thing done. We got to ship. Oh my gosh, we got to ship. And then you feel bad too, because it's like, if I don't carry some of this weight, that means someone else is gonna have to carry that weight. So then it gets really lopsided.
Mm. And that's when your body needs to kick out its own legs underneath yourself and just be like, yo, fucking sit down for a second.
Yeah.
Some burnout comes from a lack of motivation. I think a lot of things come from what your expectations are and how you visualize things, how you go along. And when you're working for yourself by yourself, you wake up whenever you want, you work however much you can, probably all day if you can stand it, and then you go to bed. And my life was like that for a year and a half, 2 years, just working on my own game. And listening to yourself is incredibly important. When things felt like they were too stressful, I just flopped on the floor and wiggled around a little bit, screaming.
That's the way to go.
You have to do it. It's got to come out. You don't want to push things too hard, and you don't want to set expectations on yourself that are just completely made up. I feel like when I'm working with a lot of students that I teach with game design or just other creative fields, they have these strange projections or beliefs about how good they should be given X amount of time or X amount of effort. I'm like, why would you think that? Do you know how much time it takes to get here? Like, calm down, it's okay, you're doing great, and let's take it one step at a time.
I mean, it's hard not to compare yourself.
Hmm.
And, sometimes that leads to extra stress. And you feel like, oh, I need to work even harder. Like, yo, you're already working hard. And I think people need to realize you're all learning at your own paces. When you were talking about rolling around on the floor, it does remind me, I do a lot of remote work also with the company I'm with. And Potato would sometimes, if it's like 3 in the morning and I'm still working, he'd walk in and just be like, and I'm like, what up? And like he'd whine because like he wants me to walk away from the computer. And it's like, what's your dog is telling you? Like, do you know I'm here? Like, kind of a jerk. So, I mean,
Pets are
friends,
wonderful for that,
family,
honestly.
I mean, I should pay him. That's a legit thing.
Yeah. Emotional support manager.
Yeah,
Look,
totally.
it's time to feed me. We have deadlines of now for my dinner.
Yes, absolutely.
The dog's telling you to take a walk.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if I took more walks, I wouldn't have those extra 20 pounds. And I'm short. There's only so many places that fat can go. So,
Pay a minimum wage.
Yeah, to kind of bounce off of that, like when I found out I was burnt out, it was because I work with my friend Patrick. He's technically my boss, but he kind of pulled me aside after a meeting and was like, "Are you okay? Is everything okay? You're kind of being like grumpy more than usual." And that's when I was like, "Oh shit! Like, there's definitely something wrong going on, and I need to like take a break." And the physical kind of, like, I would come into work and then my whole body was just literally fatigued. Like, I've never felt so tired before. So yeah, it's good to have kind of support systems
absolutely.
to kind of keep you in check and remind you to take care of yourself.
And ideally, those support systems are not only your family and your friends, but your coworkers. It's extremely important that you have leads that you feel comfortable enough to talk to about burnout, about where you are mentally or physically, and hopefully they will be able to advocate for you and even be able to push for additional space if need be, even further up the chain, maybe like a director level or something like that. I think with burnout, you often hear things about crunch. Crunch is real. Crunch is real. Crunch is very, 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 very real. think there are a lot of people that outside of the industry are like, well, I work overtime, so how is that different? With crunch in the game industry, a lot of times you have people that are working overtime for a continued amount of time. And that might be, maybe it's only a few days or several weeks or several months. I've known some people that have crunched for a year, or, you know, there was a time where I was working 7 days a week, and a lot of them were 13 to 18 hours long, and it sucks because you no longer feel like a person anymore. You're just, I don't know, your whole body collapses.
Right, it's weird to see the sun again.
Yeah, it's
You know-
weird to see the sun and get groceries when there are other humans out. Like, it's kind of weird.
Yeah, kind of, although I guess one weird upside is like when you finally do drive home, there's no traffic.
Yeah, I mean, that's cool, but then you're kind of like trying to stay awake too. Like,
Yeah, no, it's a bad thing, don't do it.
I think not only crunch can kind of cause burnout, but kind of Richard touched on this with kind of younger developers. I remember when I was starting out, I was constantly thinking about games and work, and I wasn't like, I would go to work on games, and then come home and work on games, and I wasn't really like taking a break because I just wanted to like, prove myself, and like,
yeah.
I was passionate, but I wasn't kind of like taking the steps to separate myself from my work. So yeah, I think that's a big part. It's like, not only can crunch do that to you, but like your own stress and expectations can make you overwork yourself sometimes.
I think that touches on a really good point too, Sam, that like, we all have our own personal expectations for ourselves and what we'd like to achieve, but there's also like this weird pressure to be like, hey, I actually belong here, because the reality of it is that the majority of the industry is a bunch of white dudes, right? And whether it's subconsciously or occasionally very much maliciously so, people will be out there to make you feel like you don't belong. So there's always a pressure of like, okay, if I made it this far, I can't let myself down, I can't let other people down, like, I have to fight to be here. And that totally like spirals into this whole crazy perfectionist burnout cycle of like, I cannot like rest for one moment, my life has to be this or else I don't belong here. It like kind of becomes yourself.
Got a pretty diverse panel here now that I'm looking. No. This is crazy.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of like imposter syndrome stuff that happens, especially among younger developers. Like you might feel like you're not good enough, or, you know, I see people younger than me that are making incredible games, and I'm like, man, what am I doing? I'm an old fart now. But yeah, maybe we can talk a little bit about how to prevent burnout.
I see you got your notes.
Scroll.
Yeah. You can use mine too.
Okay. So, life is complicated, people are complicated. I think we're all learning different things at different stages of learning, even just normal society things, and then just the particulars of our craft. We're all at different stages at different times. To prevent burnout, I think requires a balance of everything. Because we often try to compartmentalize or segment parts of our lives into this is just my creative part, and this is over here, this is over there. And I feel like it's all connected by you anyway, so you'll take your stresses from one place to the other. It's better to think about things a little bit more holistically. And like you were saying before, or what was said before, coworkers are part of your network, your friends and family are part of your network, Twitter is not part of your network. So when I think about how I move forward with my creative crafts, I listen to myself, and I don't push where my brain's telling me like, you can't keep shoving facts into your head, you've got to stop, and then I pivot. So whether that's helping somebody else or explaining something that I know, switching mediums. I do a lot of drawing now, and I kind of put down piano for a bit. That helps a lot. And even though my schedule now is go to work on games, go home, and do all these various game projects, in between there's some exercise and drawing and communicating and trying to keep the whole thing at a nice balance.
Doing something for yourself is super important. And by for yourself, I mean something that is your I've been baking a lot of bread. Who's eating this bread in this house? Oh, it's me. And potato. Now I've been giving people bread, so I'm like, well, I don't have anywhere for this bread to go. But specifically in regards to crunch, since I do a lot of production stuff too, communication. Communication is key. You know, a lot of times for the game industry, crunch is caused not just by the developers themselves. Sometimes it's caused from external sources like the publisher. Sometimes they'll move a date and move the date for launch or some random milestone, and that's out of our control as devs. Sometimes crunch happens because of poor production. Sometimes it happens by poor management of expectations. Sometimes it's feature creep. There are so many things that cause crunch, and so many things that ideally we as developers, as humans, we can do to help prevent that. And I think the number one thing is communication and making sure that your team members, your lead especially, are people that are willing to listen to you, willing to listen to, you know, your mental health. Mental health is extremely important, just as much, even more so than physical health, I think. I've seen people go through divorces because of burnout and crunch. I've seen relationships shatter. I've seen a lot of people just go downhill. And you know, ideally we don't have that. We shouldn't have that. And you have a lot of studios that will hire people and say, well, if you don't like the whole crunch or burnout stuff, like, well, there's a whole bunch of other people lined up and ready. Yes, but you know, some of those people are newer to the industry, and just because they're passionate and ready doesn't mean that they should go through that same thing too. And ideally, we as old farts should be trying to better the community for both ourselves and for future generations.
Yeah, I think that's why it's super, well, it's both tragic, but I think super enlightening. Like the other day, this CD Projekt Red about Cyberpunk, right? How they're like, oh, well, we had to push it back again. And oh, it turns out that it's still a death march. It's just a death march for several months. And how this is now becoming much more of a thing that the consumer is aware of, like, hey, this studio that's making this game, I like they're putting their developers through hell, and like being able to make more conscious choices about your purchasing decisions. And like you had mentioned, it's kind of hard as someone trying to get into the industry to tell someone, hey, I'm not gonna do this crazy crunch thing. Like, we need to either, you know, give ourselves more time, we need to scope down. Like, there's only so many levers you can pull to actually do something that will help your developers rather than harm them. And I think those conversations are happening a little bit more openly now, and there's definitely a lot more eyes on the industry because of it. And I'm kind of hoping that, like, because of, you know, the news websites reporting on this, more conversations happening, that these students who are coming out like doe-eyed and eager to get into games because hell yeah, games are cool, that's why we're here at PAX, like we love this thing. It shouldn't be a thing that then churns and spits them out. It should be something that respects them as a person and enables them to learn and grow and to bring something really cool into games that we haven't seen before. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah, I think I'm going to try and touch on all these things, but you know, having different hobbies is great. Doing stuff not for like.
I'm looking for some bread friends.
I am the bread friend.
Yeah, okay, I'm seriously gonna give you some bread.
Okay, as long as I can give you some of my bread.
But I also think like,
Bread for everyone.
so to talk about the bread, it's like, I think in our current time, it's like you want to do something so you can share it on social media, and that's like not how you should live your life. You should do something because you want to, because
But
you
I need to
enjoy
prove
it.
I did a thing. I
Yeah.
made this bread, and here's a really good filter for my bread.
I'll show you some
You don't need
great
more
photos of my bread.
Death Stranding likes. Yeah, so I think hobbies are great. For me, I actually like went to therapy last year, which was the best video game I've ever played. And that stuff can be expensive, but it was great to just have someone to talk to where I could say whatever I wanted, and it stays in that room. You know, it's like there's a good release of that, and I think you kind of see that in the game industry because people meet up all the time for drinks and just vent about their job, and that's like a form of therapy. So yeah.
I agree with the therapy thing. Honestly, I wish I had gone to therapy and started medication for like anxiety and depression like way earlier than I did. Honestly, life-changing. But I feel like that's a really core part of being able to prevent burnout is really knowing you yourself as a person and what you actually need to be happy, not what you think you need to be happy. And at least for me, in talking with my therapist, I figured out like, okay, I have super perfectionistic tendencies and this is how it ties into this thing at work and this is how I get into that burnout spiral, and here are things that I need to actively work on to keep myself healthy and happy, which I didn't really know how to kind of figure out on my own. I guess I'm not super great at introspection in that way, but like to have someone else to be like, hey, no, that's a thing you do, and that's totally okay, but like this is how it's making these problems. Like that's super helpful, and whether you can get that kind of information just from talking to your friends or by just going to therapy, I think that's kind of a key part of figuring out what you, the human being, needs to exist and, you know, make time for yourself and like figure out what boundaries you need to kind of keep into place to make yourself healthy and happy.
+1 support for therapy. It's great. I wish I had done it a little sooner. And I have a great family and friend network, but still, there are very specific things that, you know, you need to talk through, or some things you only talk with this group, some things only this group, and a therapist is really good for identifying certain areas that are under cared for and kind of poking them a little bit.
Absolutely. +5 for mental health stuff. Like for less than a cup of coffee from unknown brand, I have medication that helps me with my anxiety and depression and just clears out some of that fog so I can see where I'm going. Like, yo! And it helps me help other people too, because, you know, as a person that helps manage his teams also, like, I would always feel guilty that I couldn't help them more. But in helping myself, that helps them also, because you can only give so much of yourself unless, you know, you are healthy as well. Mental health, guys, super important. Also, my coworker got shingles. He got shingles because he was so overstressed. Like, and you laugh, but like shingles as an adult is terrible. And so now, you know, we've been talking about steps of how can we help prevent further outbreaks of your shingles, Mr. Shingle. And a lot of it is communication, making sure that he has time for himself and having hobbies outside of work, having more time for his family as well, and then also feeling like he can rely on other team members to help with tasks that are on his plate that sometimes he's not able to take over. So don't get shingles, take care of yourself. You have to be 65 to get the next shingle shot. Like, yo, a lot of you guys have way too much time until then.
So yeah, we've kind of talked about preventing burnout, but let's say you're burnt out. What are kind of practices y'all do to kind of recover from that? I know Carrie said you're on a sabbatical right now, taking a break.
Yeah, so for me, I feel like it wasn't the kind of thing where it's like, okay, I can take a week or two off and just remove myself from my work and I'll be better. This is like 10 years in the making, consistently pushing myself too far. Like, okay, I really need to take a step back and be like, what is my life outside of games? Which, again, like you do something for 10 years, you graduate from college, you go to do the thing. It's hard to do, right? And it's been a really strange time where, like, you know, when I was at work, I used to know what every day was, my schedule and everything is now nebulous. Like, I don't know what time is. Days just kind of happen, and that's weird, and my brain keeps going, hey, but like, what are you doing? What are you doing productively? And I'm like, well, I took a walk today, I read a book. That's pretty great. And it's weird to make the space to kind of like slowly figure that out again, but if it was just in the span of a week, or just like, okay, I'll stay at work and try to figure this out in my free time, I don't think I would have the mental space or energy to even try to attempt, like, what is me outside of this? And people who are much more responsible about their mental health, I've talked to about this too, and they suggest that, like, hey, once you're done with a project, if you can at a bigger AAA studio, or if you're on an indie project, like, take a couple weeks off and just be like, cool, the game is shipped, we fixed any mission critical bugs where like stuff's crashing, and then we just hands off. And it seems like just creating that space to truly mentally like detach, like get off Twitter. Twitter's the best and the worst at the same time, like get away from it. All your social media, go take a trip, go read a book, get away from computers. That seems to be like a really big key in just remembering who you are as just like a squishy human body and not whoever the heck at whatever studio.
I think for me, last year I actually took a break off of a lot of social media stuff, like Instagram is all quiet. I used to do a lot of cosplay stuff. So much so that like I visited family in the Philippines and they're like, so you're not doing your costume thing? And I'm like, yeah, and that's something I want to do more of now. Like I want to get back into doing things that were fun for me to do, things that are physically creative, things where you can make these mistakes and you can't just control all whatever. See like Z, what is it?
Control Z.
Thank you. Control Z this thing, and work with those mistakes that you have. For me, it's a little difficult because the crew that I'm with, we're a bunch of freelancers. So we're all hired mercs in general. And so it's hard for me to step back a lot of times. So what I've been doing is on Slack, I've just been turning off notifications from certain times, you know, like from 10 till 4 in the morning. You know, cool, that sounds reasonable. And letting people know, like, if you really need me, like, you gotta put the little at thing button or I'm not gonna check it. And that was really difficult, and it sounds silly for that to be a difficult thing because, you know, I used to look at it all the time, and my fellow was like, hello, I'm still here too, and Potato would start whining when I'm holding a phone, like, I'm sorry, dog, like, I gotta answer this thing, like, no, they actually can wait. So I think it's those small steps of separating yourself from work, and like Kira was mentioning, like, finding who you are as a person outside of the position that you hold in a company. I think that's really important.
Working in games is a little odd. Everybody knows it's a highly creative field. And if you can imagine what artists were like back in the day, like hundreds of years ago, they were quite eccentric characters, and oftentimes their art is so amazing because their lives are so different and odd and unique. And yet, we're trying to get a lot of that kind of creativity in a room, and we're trying to make them do it on a schedule, and we're trying to predict when their crazy, amazing art and all that hard work is going to be done. That's already a natural like conflict, stress, tension that we have in the industry. So a lot of times, I guess we can get a quick show of hands. If anyone out there is sort of doing an indie project or they feel like they're teaching themselves the craft that they want to excel in, and you don't, yeah, go ahead and raise your hand if you're teaching yourself.
Yay, you can.
Games are quite complex, and I tell that to people that I mentor all the time. And to help, I've noticed this after, you know, teaching violin and English and game design and other things, that there's 5 distinct stages that self-learners go through. And I think it's really helpful to understand these things because it sets your mind at ease. You don't push past where you are, you just rest in where you are. And if any of this sounds familiar, that's great because I made this up. But number one is when you first decide to do a thing and you're super excited. So everything is just amazing to you. Every YouTube video, you're like, save, watch later. And you're like, every book you want to grab up and read. And there's a ton of excitement that happens at the onset of realizing this is something that you want to put your time and your energy into. That's a great stage. Don't worry about that one. But at some point there comes this turn in which people become highly selective of where their help is coming from. So you might want to try to give somebody advice, or you want to help them in some way, and then they'll start questioning where that advice comes from. Like, oh, well, how good are you at this? And you're like, it's just good advice. Like, I heard it from somewhere. Hold on. And it's an interesting turn because at some point, learners have to stop listening to some things and focus on others. And I feel like they're not at a good opportunity to make that call themselves. That's why it's so hard to learn by yourself. You're just making calls and you don't have the experience yet. But that leads into a certain stage in which you reject all input. And people get a little bit snappy, a little bit hostile, but really it's just the response that you give when you are near your breaking point, when your brain is overloaded, when you're thinking about too much, when you feel like you have to hold all the information and sort through it all, and it's just a big mess because things are complicated. And that kind of goes into a slight opening back up again, where you let a few people help you out, like, okay, give me the one thing I need to get me out of this terrible spiraling hole that I'm in. And there's no one thing that can get you out of it so far, so usually that doesn't go so well. And then there's the crash, or the burnout, or the wall people hit when they want to give up completely. And I feel like that cycle happens a lot. And kind of identifying where you are in that timeline really helps me rest in what I'm doing. It's not bad to be in any particular stage. You're doing this all by yourself. There are resources out there, but ultimately, you are the teacher and the student. That's a double job. That's a double job. So yeah, it's just what I reflect on and think on a lot.
Well, one of the things I experienced during burnout is I took a break, but I also I went and showed like a personal game I was working on at the Smithsonian, which was, it kind of reminded me of like why I got into games, like seeing people experience the thing I made and like have joy and bring joy to them. And sometimes I think you need to, for me, I needed to like reevaluate why I was in games. I was like, okay, I made it here, but now what? And kind of seeing that let me, it gave me more motivation, right, to stay and keep doing this, because it was like a reminder of how much I enjoy spreading joy and just seeing people experience my games. And kind of, I also kind of separated what I'm good at, like what I'm good at and what things I actually want to do in games. Because when you're indie, sometimes you're just doing like a bunch of stuff, but like I hate 3D modeling. I'm not good at it, and I dislike doing it so much. So on the current project at work, I was like doing a lot of it, and I was like, yo, we need to hire a 3D artist, because A, this looks like trash, and B, I do not like doing this. So I think when you're indie, it's important to kind of find your focus and kind of have other people help you out if you can.
I think it's kind of like, if you think of yourself like a simulation, that sounds really spooky. Like
Simulation theory?
like let's pretend you're playing like SimCity 2000. You know, you're focusing on this one little residential area, like, oh gosh, there's so much traffic here, like, oh no. And you're focusing all your time like looking at like nitpicking very specific things, when really sometimes you just need to back up and see the grander picture of like, okay, what is it that is really the problem? What is it that I really like? And then try and improve bigger picture rather than, you know, nitpicking, because a lot of times that nitpicking is what leads to burnout, because you're in that cycle of destruction, really.
I call it the learning cycle.
Side note, I was once the mayor in 2000. We had a problem with traffic. I got rid of that problem by taking out all of the roads and putting a train station. Train went everywhere. It was great, no more traffic. People hated it. Can't make everyone happy. Then I threw down a tornado. I mean, I'm no longer the mayor.
Can you come fix Austin traffic, please?
Yes, I can fix Austin traffic.
Okay.
I have a suggestion. Check out all the roads.
I also think like another kind of good thing to do is it's okay to like quit doing stuff. Like I was doing a lot of extracurricular activities outside of my job with like organizing game events and yeah, just a bunch of stuff. And at one point I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like I would like to stop, and kind of finding a support to like pass that on to for someone else to do, or just stopping was really, it's hard because you feel like you have a responsibility to keep doing this thing, and you like owe people this thing because they love it and you want them to be happy, but sometimes you just gotta quit stuff for your own good. It's the traffic problem.
It really is. Like, it sounds silly, but it's the traffic
Yeah.
problem. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we have like 15 minutes left. Why don't we do like plugs or any closing comments, and then we'll do questions. Does that sound good?
Yep.
Okay.
I speak for everybody. Yep. It's okay. I'm not going first.
I'll go first. You can follow me at my name at Sam Palavan on Twitter, SAMPAHLAVAN. I'm showing a game here at PAX called Bill Hates Video Games at the PAX Rising booth. Yeah, come check it out.
It's awesome. Go play.
You see my name. You should totally follow me on Twitter. If there's anyone here that is doing indie games and they need audio support, hit me up, yo. Because my team and I love helping indie people. We have flexible rates.
I highly recommend Cat's team. They're very good people.
No, like we're pleasant. But also for people that just want to follow me as a civilian, you should totally message me if you don't see me posting any cosplay stuff this year, because I really do want to make myself happier. So remind me, like, yo, do the thing you said you're gonna do.
Do it for Potato.
Yeah, I'm gonna do it for Potato. I got you. Thank you, and I will post more bread pictures. Yo, check out the bread.
Yeah, I like the bread.
Bread?
I do want some
Oh,
bread.
I'll get some bread
Thank you very much.
for Lisa to give to Steve to give to Cindy to give to you.
But if it takes that long.
I'll deliver some bread for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I guess that's my turn. Kirby Kid is my Twitter. I do a lot of crazy projects. The community that I maintain is called Design Oriented. We do a lot of game design studies and work, and we try to do community a little differently, a little more consciously, and a little more focused. But if anybody wanted to reach out to me and talk to me, ask me any questions, my Twitter's there. You can find me on the Discord channel. All the links are connected. I got finished teaching a free online game design school called the Mario Maker Workshop. So it was just open to anybody on the internet who wanted to come. And we taught level design through Mario Maker 2, and it was a ton of fun. But we do stuff like that often enough. And if you're interested or you want guidance or support or anything like that, it is.
Let's do a joint one, design and audio.
Okay.
Wow.
There it is.
What a great idea.
So I guess related, I'm over there with the handle Not So Serious, although I think my Twitter handle is with 2 S's. I can't remember because someone keeps taking my name on all these different platforms and I have to just add more S's and I can't remember anymore. Because I am on sabbatical, please don't ask me things about art or about games for the time being, or at least I won't get back to you for a little while. And I guess my plug is less for the stuff that we're making right now at Alchemy, because we haven't announced anything right now, and also I'm not there on purpose. However, I am originally an illustrator by trade, and if you want to see just cool random doodles that aren't for a product, but are for fun and for mental health, I will be occasionally posting them there if you're into that kind of thing.
I'm into that.
Yeah. I got some painty pens. I'm going around Austin, drinking coffee and drawing stuff and petting stray cats. It's great.
What about the puppies? You gotta pet the pups.
Stray puppies, not so much. Stray cats, I'm all over.
I was driving home from work. I'm sorry. There was an unsupervised puppy pooping, and I'm like, yo. He was really cute. I was like, you done? He's like, I'm done. And I guess he had gotten out of the house.
Oh,
and he thought he would explore the world and poop somewhere. So I
Leaving
pet
his
him.
mark on the world.
Okay. He went home. But I highly recommend that.
Hmm. And I encourage you all to also pet stray cats and maybe not
Yeah,
stray dogs as
I
much,
like
but I think unless we got anything else, questions would be good.
Yeah.
Cool.
Go to the mic right now.
Yeah, I guess that's what that
Yeah, there's a
mic
mic in the middle.
Yeah, fight it out.
Hello. Oh, hello. Hi. So, real quick comment. You guys mentioned getting medicated. That is huge. I recently have started feeling the effects of my medication kick in, and it has just changed my life. It's amazing. So, like, amazing. So that's awesome that you guys said that, because I wish someone had told me that
Yeah.
forever ago. So that was just amazing. All right, question. So I suffer from burnout a lot. I do a lot of freelance stuff. And so I find myself getting burnout, and I'm like, all right, I need to stop. I like kind of take care of myself, and I'm like, I'm gonna stop burning out, and I'm gonna do that. And then I can't get myself started again. How do you guys, once you're recovered from burnout, how do you start getting going again?
I'm just going to repeat the question. It was, how do you get yourself started again after recovering from burnout, basically? Yeah.
I find that if you have a community of other devs, it's really helpful. You know, and it's difficult as a freelancer because a lot of times we feel isolated. I think joining a Discord channel would be really great. Reaching out to people on Twitter can be really, really, really helpful as well.
That's the only good use for Twitter, reaching out to people
The
directly.
red pictures are kind
And
of cute.
we'll see the pictures of
Yeah.
I think part of it too is like, a lot of us are kind of taught this illusion of like, oh, when inspiration and motivation strikes you, go at it. And it's like the reality, that's like 2% of the time, dude. Like, so much of it is just determination and habit, where it's like, okay, I know that I don't feel like doing this right now, but kind of once I kick my butt into gear and start doing it, I'm gonna start feeling it again. And every time that at least I've done that, even though I drag my feet and I feel like a big baby where I'm like, I don't wanna do it, and I get into it, I'm like, oh yeah, I love this thing. I'm gonna go do it now.
I think also thinking about like depression and trying to be a productive human at the same time is really difficult. So I find that a lot of times writing a list and really breaking it down into even the most minuscule pieces
Yeah,
it feels great because then you feel accomplished. Like even if it's something simple like make me my task list, blam, check mark. Because it's so simple, but you feel like you're accomplishing something. And sometimes you need to break it down to feel like you're actually finishing something. And it's hard to see that progression from start to finish, even if it's just something that you know you love to do.
I mean, honestly, it's kind of like gamifying your life, right? And there's a reason why so many games use like short-term quests, long-term quests. Like, here's the big overarching story, but like, yeah, but I want to do that side quest for 50 hours. Like, it feels good to get those little nuggets of reward, and we can totally use that to our own benefit for our everyday stuff.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey guys, I really like your panel. I'm not a game dev, but software, but I can totally relate. I think one of the things I'd like to ask is, how do you stop yourself from doing burnout again? Like doing the same behaviors that got you there in the first place, and the fear of that almost just creeping up on you. What steps do you guys take? I love the idea of the list. I somewhat do that. But any advice, anything?
So the question is, how do you prevent yourself from doing burnout again and the fear of burnout?
Because like maybe one more time you just quit what you're doing, and what else passion will I have next?
I think just kind of doing a self-check is good. Just kind of stepping outside yourself and thinking about your mental state and your physical state. Are they okay? I think that'll help, and just kind of knowing when to just take a break when you're pushing yourself too much. Like, I'm showing this game here, and after this weekend, me and Michael, I'm just gonna be like, yeah, we're gonna take a break for a bit because it's a lot of work and I'm tired.
I think, you know, if it's possible, if you're able to communicate with your lead about, you know, burnout, I think that would be the ideal situation. And seeing what steps that they have as a lead to help prevent the rest of the team going through burnout. I feel like a lot of it comes down to communication, and unfortunately not all leads are welcome to hearing those types of things. So it might even be a situation where, you know, finding other coworkers whom you know you can talk to and discuss things. It might even be a situation where, like, okay, is there someone above that lead that I can talk to about burnout, or even HR? Communication sucks, but it's really, really hard, and it sounds like it should be really easy. And so, like, I feel like that would be the ideal situation, that you'd be able to communicate either to your coworkers, your lead, or even those above that person.
Awesome, thank you guys.
I haven't been playing games since I was probably in primary school or something, like first, second grade. But over the years, I've started seeing, like, I've been watching Jim Sterling and a bunch of other YouTubers. They always talk about how the video game industry likes to think of itself or compare itself to movies and everything, and the movie industry, but one of the things the movie industry has is they have guilds, they have unions that make sure that people aren't getting destroyed and burned out in those situations. And how, do you think it's possible in the next 10, maybe few years, 10 years, maybe 15, 20, that in the long term, that video games will start having guilds and unionization to make sure that people who are creative, because we like to think of the video games industry as a very creative thing, but there's people in Hollywood that all say, oh, it's very creative, but they have guilds and unions to protect them, to make sure that they aren't ground into chuck and churned out and just destroyed.
Yeah, so the question is, do you think the game industry will unionize in maybe the next decade, or is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah, because I mean, you brought up Cyberpunk 2020, because that's in Poland, but there still can be international groups. And then there's Fortnite, and everyone knows they're going through crunch every day of the year, because they're just churning out content like crazy.
Yeah, I think you're definitely seeing more kind of unions, like the Game Workers Unite. There's a branch in Austin coming together. And just kind of last year, the big event was the Riot walkout. I don't know if you know about that,
Yeah.
but a lot of Riot employees walked out based off of kind of what was going on in the studio. And I think definitely in the next decade, we'll see a shift. We're already seeing a shift, but
Yeah, it's
something big's going to happen.
And,
Yeah.
controversial topic about unions. I think they can be really beneficial. For example, with audio folks, you have some audio freelancers that do indie games, and sometimes they're putting their rates extremely low when their value is a lot higher. And it's difficult because, if we had a union, we would definitely be able to get some better representation, but then, there are some people that feel like it's difficult in that regard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I guess to add on that too, I think it's great that, I guess the way the news cycle has been working, like these things are being brought to light so much more and being talked about, so like the everyday consumer gets to see, oh wow, this is actually like a huge problem, and can now hold businesses more accountable for their actions. And I think that's kind of the key to actually, like if there is no consequence, there's no reason for anyone to change a practice that helps them, right? So I feel like it's possible in the next 10 years to see a union, or at the very least, some kind of protections at different companies where, people will be like, hey, I won't work at your company unless there's XYZ protection.
Hello. My question is, I was wondering, because I really want to get into game development, I really want to, create something, I guess, but I am absolutely horrified of the giant that is the game industry, and I don't know where to go, and I'm really worried of just getting destroyed by it mentally, physically. So do you have any advice for someone younger like me?
Lots. There's so many things. I think.
Yeah. I got a Discord, right? At the Mario Maker Workshop, we got people from Japan, New Zealand, Germany. Some people were old, some people were little kids, like high school age. So we handle a wide bandwidth of different types of people, and we have a lot of experience there that can give people the advice they need at the place that they are, and provide like tools and advice and exercises for them. So it's free. It's the easiest place to get hooked into either what game design is or parts of the industry.
Mentorship in general.
Yeah, just free mentorship. I do free consulting for indie games and free.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Finding student projects is a great way to start, because then you get to learn how to work more with a team. I think that's really important. Finding other like-minded groups. Like Austin, for example, we have several game dev groups. Maybe finding one in your neck of the woods would be really helpful as well, or even forming your own club is a great start. Internships are also really helpful, and even I think finding mentorship from a person specifically in the discipline that you're looking for really helps. People feel really intimidated in reaching out to devs, when I think a lot of devs are very accessible nowadays. So reach out to folks, and I'm sure that they will more than happily give some advice.
And I would say that this is like the one spot where Twitter is actually really awesome, is that as a platform, it kind of makes everyone feel a little bit more equal, and it's much easier to go on Twitter, follow some people in the professions that you like, and see them talk about their day-to-day struggles, what things that are happening as a conversation in the industry, what things they're struggling with in their current project, and other devs will hop in and be like, oh, well, you do this thing in Unity and that fixes it. Where there's this kind of openness of communication that hasn't really existed before, and like, even like, this is a huge thing within the Twitter community for art too, and like, this is something I personally really wish was a thing when I was a student, just to like kind of, it feels like taking a peek behind the curtain, but the curtain's invisible the whole time, and like, it's kind of okay to be peeking. That's Twitter. And it's just, it's a nice community that you can kind of lurk at, like not necessarily have to engage until you feel like you have a specific question you want answered, but kind of learn just by watching other people go through their day-to-day, I think is super helpful. And then from there, you know, finding, you know, your local community people. And like Kat mentioned, there's a bunch of different groups in Austin that meet up. If there's anything like that in your local area too, that's also super helpful, because like local community is a lot, and like that's where a lot of friendships come from too. Like that's so I know Sam, so.
Game jams, also
Yeah.
for game jams, that's great, because, you know, maybe you're nervous about meeting new people. Game jams are great because you work in a very small amount of time, and kind of get the flow of things, and let's say maybe you guys didn't jive well together, like, goodbye, on to the next thing.
My answer is, it's not that scary. We're just a bunch of nerds.
Yeah,
You'll
we
be
really
fine.
are. Like, I just have dog pictures.
Cool.
Thank you.
We're running short on time, so let's do the lightning round. Go for it.
Okay. First of all, thanks for all your personal accounts. I really appreciate all.
Lightning.
I'm trying to self-teach and looking to pivot into the industry eventually, but I wanted to know what specific incompatibilities do you see, like, with the way games are made versus like the American kind of like business model, how it's run. Is there any? I know that's not really
Capitalism's bad. Lightning response: capitalism doesn't support any creative industry well. That being said, try to live your passion wherever you can, and if that's not necessarily in your work, so be it, as long as it makes you happy.
Make art, pay rent.
Yeah.
Make the things you like.
There was something that you with the purple hair said earlier in this talk, and it was about how older people can learn from younger people and the vice versa. I think that was something very important for me to hear, because my boss expects me to work 16-hour days while he goes home and eats dinner and then shows up late for work. And I just wanted to say thank you for that.
I hope that you find your place in a workspace where you are in good company.
Also, how can I legally get rid
I can help you there. Talk to someone above them. HR is, if there's an HR.
All right.
of it? Thank you.
Thank you. That is our time, but we'll hang around outside to answer the rest of the questions. Thank you all for coming, and thank you to my panelists. Yeah.
Hi. Now we're at public gazing here. I think it's I was pretty honest before. I'm gonna listen to it.
I would love that.